Hello, guys. This is Shantae, and it's been a while since I've done a video, um, but I know that it's good to write things out, um, and so I try to make it. I want to just go over my trading performance, and I've been finding some improvement in my execution, and I just want to go over some things that I've been incorporating in my trading, been trying to work on. Um, and just seeing some results. So let's go over it. All right. So this is I started an Aqua Futures account. They're part of the Tradeovate prop firm um, partnership. If you go to Tradeovate prop, you'll see that there's a bunch of prop firms that are associated with Tradeovate. And so at the time, I was looking for a a prop firm, mainly looking at the cost. And I was able to find this one for, a beginner 25K phase one that you see here. It was $50. So I said, that's the cheapest one. It's under the Tradeovate prop firm. Let me give that a try. I don't know the reputation. I don't know, if there's been any complaints or anything like that, but I said, I'll give it a try. I didn't have much cash remaining. I think I only had about $60, and I took the opportunity to go with this firm. And I've had this account for over a month now. Um, as you can see there, started on June 11th, 2026, and now it's July 20th. So I've been able to hang on to this account, and I think is that was the beginning. That was my primary goal when I signed up with this account. I said I just want to keep it as long as possible. Like, I've been so frustrated. This is not the my first eval account that I've had. I've had plenty of eval accounts with different providers, whether it's Apex, My Funded Futures, Go Funded Traders, or Go Funded Futures. Um, and I've tried a few firms, and I've never been able to make it through a payout. Um, but given the fact I only had $60, as I was dwindling down the money that I had in my live account with Trade of 8, just my personal account, and I was left with $60. I said, well, I can't trade a micro contract with this, so let me try my hand with an eval. But that was discouraging to me because I've tried a bunch of evals and I haven't been successful in the payout. So I was just like, well, you know, my goal is just to hold on to this account as long as possible, even if I only make $18, a day, so be it. Hold on to it. And it's been working out much better than I anticipated, and we're gonna go over some things of why. All right. All right. So when I started off, June 11th, I had a system in place, and but also during this time, during the month of June, I also set out some time to kind of automate a lot of my steps. I do a lot of manual steps to come up with my thesis to help me determine if I'm going to buy or sell. And just the process alone could take a lot of time. And so I remember just sitting down with Gemini and I knew that the steps that I do is very repetitive, and I knew that it could be automated. So I finally took some time. It took me like a few days, a week or more. And I was just going, little by little of trying to automate a lot of the steps. And eventually I was able to automate, majority, or if not, a huge chunk of the process that I do, which gave me more free time to look at, to research different patterns, to kind of, to spend more time looking at patterns, trying to find, other things, test things out. Like I wasn't spending a lot of my time doing the process. Now I'm spending my time discovering, different techniques and things like that. So started off doing my original, on the first couple days, and as you can see, I mean, that following week, from June 15th to June 18th, and pretty much even the following week, pretty much from June 15th to June 25th, almost for 2 weeks, I was just losing back to back because I thought I had discovered another technique that can increase my ROI. When I started this, eval, or even for a long time, I had my risk to reward, or let me put it this way, I would shoot for 16 ticks take profit, and I would have a 65 tick stop loss. And I've stuck with that for a long time, for years, as I've been developing my edge. But when I automated majority of the steps, I was thinking that maybe I could, instead of only shooting for 16 ticks, I was hoping that I can find opportunities where I can shoot for 32 ticks, 60 ticks, 8 or even 80 ticks. And it can kind of bring that risk to reward ratio closer together. Yeah, I've at times I've had a high win rate with the 16 65 tick TP stop loss. TP stop loss. But in the event, if I was to get a stop loss, which it does happen, which it has happened, it would be very discouraging. It would really put a hole in my profits. I can wipe out a week's worth of gains just by a trade hitting the 65 tick stop loss. So it required me to try to be perfect, to find, just to try to be as perfect as possible, because I never wanted to hit a stop loss. But it's inevitable. It's going to happen. You can't. I was not perfect. So from June 15th to 25th, I was looking at different techniques to bring that risk to reward ratio closer together, but it just wasn't working out. But there's a lot of things that I want to touch base on. What was really cool about the month of June, because if this was the old version of myself, I would have probably blown up this account. But one thing that I tried to stick to with this eval is I said to myself, hey, you got to accept your losses. If it hits your loss, if it hits your stop loss, you're done for the day. And I pretty much did that, even through the trial phase of putting these new techniques into practice, into my eval. If it didn't work, I just got out of the market. And even though I'm having these consecutive losses back to back to back, I was still able to stay in the game. Mind you, like I said earlier, all I had was $60. And so didn't know what I was gonna do. I was gonna come up with the fund, to buy another eval. So I was really proud of myself that I just I stuck to just accepting the loss. The one thing that did help me face the losses was the possibility that, oh, well, tomorrow I could possibly have a 35 tick move, or I can succeed on a 40 tick or 80 tick move. because I'm doing my analysis and I'm seeing that, these are possibilities for me. But searching for that higher ROI um, within my strategy just didn't pan out. And after going, going through a week, to 2 weeks of not having any consistent wins, I say, Shantae, you need to go back to what works, right? So I went back to my 16 ticks, focusing on those very quick scalps, you know. But as I was testing these ideas out in market replay, I was testing them out with a 16 tick TP and a 16 tick stop loss. Instead of doing 16 ticks take profit with a 65 tick stop loss, I had went 1-to-1. And I said, why don't I try that, in the eval? Just go 1-to-1, bring that stop loss up, just to do 1-to-1. And so, and that also, I was able to, because if going with 16 tick take profit with a 65 tick stop loss, I can only utilize maybe, 1, 2, or 3 micros. I'll be risking, $82, or something like that with the fees and commissions, to make 18, or $160 to make, $36. Like, it was a little bit off, but I felt that I needed to have that space in order for the trade to work out, for all these years. But when I said, if I can do a 1-to-1, 16 to 16, then I could pretty much risk almost the same. Like I could risk just about, if I'm going to use 2 micros, is damn near, it's not so off from, using 1 E-mini contract, right? Because I'll be risking 200 to make 200, about 200, and so I said, wow, that's cool. So let me try that. So started, just to kind of get my attitude back up and kind of improve my mood. I just did some very small scalps using 1 micro contract on the 26th and 29th. But when it came to January, what am I talking about? When it came to July, that's when I had that idea to do just 1-to-1 and to use a mini contract rather than a micro. And so far it's been going really well, as you can see. I'm in and out of the market. I trade typically at the US Open 9:30, and whether I win or lose is usually determined in a matter of seconds. So, and because I was able to bring that stop loss up to 1-to-1, rather being in a negative risk to reward, as people may say it, it makes me feel much better that if I have a loss, that potentially the next day I could break even. I could have a win, and it could kind of put me back into the game. It's not gonna punch a hole in my pocket, And so I just been sticking to that. Now, on the 7th, July 7th, I believe the trade hit my stop loss, and I had to adjust, because sometimes when it hits your stop loss, it happens so fast. And at the time, I just didn't process it fully. I immediately, almost without hesitation, jumped right back into the market. And I had to tell myself, like, I'm still working on this. I'm still working on not compounding my losses. On the 8th was another, I actually hit the soft breach. Soft breach is if you have a daily loss of more than $600, it's going to cancel all your trades and kick you out of the market for the remainder of the day. And that happened to me on the 8th because what happened the day before, it hit my stop loss. I immediately jumped back in the trade. I was able to break even, make a small little profit. That created a bad habit, for me. So what happens the next day? I wasn't right in my thesis. It hits my stop loss. I immediately jump back in. It hits my stop loss again. I try to jump back in a third time. It hits my stop loss. By that time the system says you're done. And thank God it had that soft breach. It was a big chunk. It was a big L, to lose $600, but at least I still had some money to keep my eval active. At least I still had some drawdown to keep my eval active. So there were still things that I had to work on, you know. Um, and so again, the next day, a little bit nervous, a little bit scared, you know. So I took a small, only used one micro contract, was successful in the trade, built my confidence back up, and felt confident on Friday and stuff. And as you can see, I had 2 more consecutive losses. And it's crazy because looking at that, it seems like I've had some issues on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So tomorrow's Tuesday, so we'll see. But like I said, I went back to the basics. One trade, 16 tick TP, bringing that stop loss up to 16 ticks, using one contract on the E-mini ES, which was the max allowed for the eval. You can't go higher than one E-mini, ES E-mini. And even till today, my golden rule is, hey, if it hits your stop loss, accept the loss. You're done. Hitting my take profit is, I've got it down. I can easily get out of the market. 16 ticks, grossing $200. Like, I'm done for the day. Like, that's good for me. I could do a manual lockout. I'm good. But I'm still working on the stop loss. I'm still working on that. But when I look at my situation and how long I've been trading, which has been 5 years, and I've seen bouts of success, some high consistency rates, and then I still end up blowing accounts, or I'm not as far as I believe I should be. It all comes back to the losses. It's not the fact that, I have a loss. The fact is that I end up compounding my losses, and those end up to being blown accounts, failed evals, failed funded, is because I go back into the market right after I have a loss, trying to break even or to make it up, and I turn a $200 loss into a $400 loss, or $600 loss, like I experienced already this month. And those those eventually lead to me not making it far in trading. And when I realized that, I said, if that's the only thing that's holding me back, it would sound like it would feel like if like just a light bulb click off in your head and be like, well, just don't compound your losses, you know. But it's also very scary, to realize that is the only thing that is keeping me from changing my life, you know. Like I'm like, is that really it? Is that the difference between me making money, potentially making a lot of money, and me not making any money? Like it just it blows my mind, So I'm really try my hardest and give myself patience and just believe in that. Like, hey, if you just if it hits your stop loss, just call it a day and come back the next day. There's a high probability, high possibility that you'll get the next trade. Because I got some green on the month. Like I got some green on. I can get some winning trades. So if I come back tomorrow, you know, I could have a green day. You know, so just trust in yourself that you can come back the next day and that you can have a green day rather than having that urge, that feeling that, oh, I have a loss, let me try to jump back in the market and make up for it. Let me try to make that back, because 99% of the time in my journey has never worked out. Maybe well, that little point where I made $57, but that is so lucky. It's so rare that I make it out. What happens majority of the time is that I end up compounding the loss. I end up turning a $200 loss into a $400 loss, five, six, and that's what ultimately I get 4 of those in a month. No matter how many green days I have, I get 4 of those type of days, and I don't. I end up blowing the account. I can't make it past the eval or whatever. So that's what I'm trying to work on. Is just continue to do what I'm doing, like to continue to follow my process. And in the event that you're wrong, step out of the market. Just call it a day. All right. July 14th, I did that. But July 15th, I didn't do it. And on July 8th, I didn't do it. Even though it doesn't show it for some reason, that was a soft breach day. I'm glad it didn't show it, because I would hate to see that negative $600 loss on there. And I don't know if it was like a psychological thing why they don't record it, because I was just like I was just felt fortunate that they didn't record it on the calendar. Because if I would have saw that, I would have been like, oh man, it just would have just discouraged me a lot. But they kept it off my calendar, and but I know it's there. I know that I have that loss and stuff like that. But I said, going forward, I'm gonna do my best to just, I either should see $194.24 or negative $205.76. Like that's all that's all the 2 numbers I want to see. As long as I'm in the eval, going forward. Now, I'm using platform tools to help with execution. Tradeovate recently added a new manual lockout feature. So after a trade, I will lock myself out. Now, Tradeovate did update this feature. Like if you already go to the risk, settings and stuff like that, they already they've kind of had something like this already. But sometimes when I used to try to activate it, it wouldn't fully activate, meaning that I can toggle the thing to say, to lock myself out, but it wouldn't be permanently locked out until 4 p.m. Like I could still go back into the settings, toggle off the risk tool, and I could attempt to take a second trade. Like if I was that, like if I was on tilt, like I can literally go back in there and change the settings and trade again. But this is like a hard lockout, you know, and I'm using it to my advantage. Like I'm completely utilizing this tool because, especially for someone like me that monitors the market sometimes, that looks at things and you can see the market activity. Maybe things are going lower. They seem like they're going lower, or all hitting new lows, or they're going higher, hitting newer highs. Like it can easily like get me like, oh, maybe I can squeeze out a couple ticks. It's always it's never nothing um substantial. It's always like, you know I was like, why did I take the risk, to grab 2 points? Like I'm all like I'm trading outside of my strategy, outside of my edge. Like I'm completely in an emotional zone, and at the end of it, to only capture like 2 points, putting myself through all that stress to try to to try to like grab an extra 2 points because maybe I saw the market activity doing some stuff, and I'm thinking like, oh, I can get in there and just scalp something. And so locking myself out just prevents that. Like I'm just done for the day. And it doesn't unlock until 4 p.m. And I really find that useful for me. Um, and also in the risk tools, they have a little feature that I'm gonna start incorporating. I've tried it in the past, but like I said, these are not permanent. You can always toggle these things off. Um, But to set my daily loss limit, like for example, if I'm risking $206, including the fees and commissions, it's like risking $206. Like for example, like say for instance, like if I initiate a trade, I'm wrong, it hits my stop loss, and how I said earlier that I immediately get back in the trade. Well, having this on, if without thinking, just completely emotional, like I just want to jump back in, it's gonna say trade. It's gonna say rejected. And for maybe that moment, that split moment, I can think and be like, Shantae, like, what are you doing? Like, because I would have to go back into the risk settings. Like, if I was really, if I really wanted to trade, I would have to go to risk settings. I would have to toggle this thing off. Like, I would have to do a couple steps, and and maybe I could, and maybe during that time, I could have some realization of what of what I'm doing. Like, hey, do you really want to do that? Like, we're working on, just like accepting our losses. So today I incorporated it. I didn't need it because it hit my TP, but I'm gonna start adding this. So if it hits my stop loss, because it happens so fast. Usually, like I said, my trades are like 10 seconds. Today's trade was 10 seconds. Sometimes they're 20, a minute. It could be really fast, determining if I won or lost. And that, sometimes your brain doesn't process it, completely. You're like, oh dang, I hit my stop loss. Let me get back in. But I don't want to do that. So having this feature, in the event that I lose and I try to get back into a trade, it's probably say trade rejected. I'll be like, what the heck's going on? What happened? I'll realize that it's my risk settings, and hopefully by that time I can just be like, okay, accept it, move away, come back tomorrow. More than likely, given your success and your high win rate, you'll probably you make it up tomorrow. Just, that's mama. Oh man, you're here.